All right, grace and peace to the body that is the church. I want to thank everybody who listens to this video, whether live or after it's been recorded. Tonight's video, I'm going to be reviewing a discussion between a preterist, that is John, and a futurist, that is Donny. Now, you'll see his channel here promoted as SFT, that is standing for truth. I highly recommend you guys check out his channel and also John's channel called Sharpening Iron Podcast. Both are good resources. On Donny's channel specifically, he has lots of debates happening on there. So if you want to see different sides of a particular position, do check out his videos. Been some time since I have done a video. There are various reasons for that. But I thought this would be a good discussion. And if there's somebody in the audience who wants to chime in and give their thoughts on the discussion between John and Donny, I will open the stream up and let you come in. If not, I'll just continue to review it on my own. So with that being said, I have a number of videos on my position on the book of Daniel. I might have to do a video or maybe like an open mic on Daniel chapter 7. Not a lot of focus. I have not had a lot of focus on Daniel chapter 7. That's largely due to my interactions with the book of Daniel has been against the Adventist position. Not really much the dispensational, although I would be against that as well. So I do agree with John on this in this discussion here. So I guess you could say I'm biased in that regard. But because of that, I have not focused on Daniel chapter 7. And I do believe that there is a futuristic element to Daniel chapter 7. That's largely due to the book of Revelation itself, quoting from it. Grace, peace to you, John. Here we go. You're welcome to come in if you'd like, or if you're busy and you can't make it, no big deal. You can listen to it later if you like and hear my thoughts on it. So with that, I will start playing the video. It is at 1.25 speed, so we can get through it. I'm already, unfortunately, starting to run out of steam, and I just started. Once you get older, it's once you sit down. I'm fine when I'm going, but once I sit down, it's game over sometimes. So with that being said, do let me know if you can hear the audio. I'm going to play it here. Do let me know if you can hear the audio for anybody listening. And I do have to say that is an epic introduction for a channel. Super cool. Gets you all pumped and everything. So Sharpening Iron Podcast is the one who is in this video interacting with Donny on Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, it looks like. I listened to this when it premiered, but I was at work, and so I was in and out. And I'm not too familiar with Donny's arguments on this. I've heard them here and there, but I just never kept them in my mind. So his arguments will be newer to me. I'll have to interact with him as I hear them. He said I was really sleepy when I was there, so I was out of it here. That's fair. I could have done a lot better otherwise, but yes. Cool. Now, if there's somebody else in the live chat who wants to join and give their thoughts on the interaction, you are welcome to. The link is there. So let's roll. I'm going to take myself out of the... Yeah, there we go. It takes a dualistic approach. It refers to past and future prophecy. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, yeah, we'll see what he says.
I'd like to go down a Daniel rabbit trail. John, you made some curious point.
No, I will say for anybody listening, I'm not sure. I was in a live stream earlier today. In the comments, somebody had mentioned that Donny was in the hospital, and I think it was referring to this Donny here. So if that is the case, I don't know the reasons why, but if that is the case, I do ask you guys to pray for his health. So keep him and his family in your prayers. So that he may have a quick and speedy recovery, and nothing major happen to him. And if it's not this Donny, the person was talking about, but if it's another Donny who is a believer, still pray for that person, even if we don't know him. He's a brother in the Lord, and prayers will definitely be beneficial for him.
The other day with praise. And as always, I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your knowledge, especially. And so I'd be curious. I would take the futurist position. Praise.
Right there. Already wrong. No, I'm just fine.
If you could share my screen, I'd like to kick off a brief discussion, John.
Man, that's hard. Oh. Makes my heart sink. Hearing that gets me in the mood. I don't even want to review a video. It's just, man, I feel for him. Man, that's hard. Not much I can say. I'm definitely going to be keeping him in my prayers big time. That man. Dang. Here we go.
With just a couple introductory questions, maybe, just so I can better understand your position. So,
yeah.
Praise, if you could share my screen real quick, brother.
What's up, Kevin?
Kevin in the house. What's going on, brother?
Hey, nothing much. What's going on, guys?
So my question, John, how do you view Daniel 9:27 and the he? And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Who do you view the he as? If you could give me maybe a brief rundown of that.
All right. So I'd take that to be Christ, the same one in 22 or 24 through 26.
Okay. So
agreed.
You would take.
I believe it's all about the same person. I don't think there's two people.
Okay. I would take the he being a pronoun, right? Every pronoun has an antecedent.
Yeah.
And so the antecedent to this he.
Now that right there does seem to be, I would say, one of the main arguments for the futurist position in these verses here, is that the he and the antecedent. I hear that quite often from futurists, so it's definitely an important argument for them.
I would take back to verse 26, the people of the prince.
If I can jump in, I feel like I don't know if it was John for praise. I think he had a discussion maybe a few days ago, but the he would have to be the Antichrist.
Well, I want to engage that for sure. And so it says, after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. So there's the substitutionary atonement, right? Jesus was cut off not for himself, but for you, for me, for everybody. He died for the sins of the world.
Now, if verse 24 is referring to the work of Christ, that means all 70 weeks refer to the work of Christ and what he accomplishes on the cross, not 69 weeks, for it says in verse 24, 70 weeks, not 69 weeks are determined upon thy people, upon thy holy city. So him agreeing to that already, in my opinion here, from what I see so far, already puts him in a bad position on this text because, again, 70 weeks are determined. And he says this is referring to the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Christ.
So right there, we have the substitutionary atonement. He was cut off in 33 AD, but something else happens after that. I think it would be redundant to have an additional prophecy of the same thing. We have the substitutionary atonement here in verse 26 at the beginning of it. Then it says, and the people of the prince that shall come. So after Christ is cut off, after he dies,
I'm going to turn the speed back down. I'm tired. I'm going to process this information slower.
he's buried, he rises again. Somebody comes. The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Well, we know that happened from 66 to 73. This is well known as the 7-year Jewish-Roman War.
Yeah, the Jewish revolt.
Right. And
I would also have a problem with that because I'm sorry to cut you off, SFT. If that's okay. Because you would also make the argument that it's a third fulfillment, right? A third prophecy fulfillment. So it could be
not necessarily. Not necessarily. I'm going to finish my point. I do believe it was a Daniel 70th week between 66 and 73. And so we have, and the people of the prince that shall come. So we know that.
I'm going to rewind that. What did he say?
Not necessarily. I'm going to finish my point. I do believe it was a Daniel 70th week between 66 and 73. And so we have, and the people of the prince that shall come. So we know that.
Wait. What does that mean? There is a 70th week in the first century. Is he trying to say that it recapitulates or something? That the first 70th week is a shadow of a future 70th week? Is that what he's implying from this text? Which I don't see that in this text at all. Maybe he'll lay that out better, but I don't see that in this text at all. That is a presupposition, in my personal opinion, that is being imposed onto this text.
Yeah, what's up, bro?
Grace and peace to you. How are you?
I'm good, man. I won't be able to stay for long, but yeah, essentially he's taking the view that this happened historically and this will happen again. It's that dual prophecy idea that it had happened with, I believe he takes it to be Titus, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember exactly how he took it. But then he says, well, that's just, he's a antitype representative of the Antichrist who will do the same thing in the future.
Yeah, you have to go to another section of scripture to get that, in my personal opinion. You don't get that in Daniel 9, 24 through 27.
Agreed. And that's why I was like, if you want to grant the interpretation that he's giving, that it is not referring to Christ necessarily, but to Titus or whatever, fine. But that doesn't get you to futurism, and that doesn't get you to dual prophecy either.
No.
None of those come from the text either. So even if he wants to dispute that it's about Christ, I think that comes from his denial of Calvinism. Because if he believes that God uses means, then we could say it's Christ through that person. He's using the Romans to accomplish this end in the same way he did in Isaiah 10.
Yeah.
So that was my point. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so you can go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Commander Titus came with the Roman legion between 66 and 73. It's not a coincidence that it was 7 years. Right in the middle of that 7-year war is when they destroyed the temple. They went in.
Okay, so Here, my position is a preterist position on this, but it is going to be a little bit different than both yours, and it's obviously his. But actually, when the temple was first, it depends on what you mean by destroyed, but
Right.
actually the people of the prince, who are the Jews, were actually the ones who first destroyed the temple. They desecrated it. They slaughtered the priest the priests, excuse me, in the temple. They desecrated the most holy place. They tore it down. They made it a fortress. And all this is historical fact. And they raped women. They had homosexual acts in the temple,
Right.
holy and most holy place. They did all the abominations you could think of in the holy and most holy place before the Romans even got there. And actually, it was the Romans who came and said and offered them peace. They said, "Let's end this. If you end this and you go back, act normal, we'll go back and leave you guys alone." And it was these zealots who did not, ignored that and kept doing it, and caused the Romans to then put the curses onto the Jews for their abominations. But it was actually the Jews, that is the people of the prince in verse 27, who desecrated and destroyed the temple. In my position. So
Yeah. Well, I just take it the way that I think Luke 24 mentions it, where the armies surround Jerusalem, right?
yeah,
And they're the ones that are said to trample it. So I just take it in that sense. I'm not sure your view necessarily contradicts mine, because I think I could say just the same thing, except I have more of an emphasis upon the actual trampling of the temple as a physical building. That type of destruction. I think it has more of an emphasis upon that, but you know that's more of a tertiary thing.
yeah. I would say verse 27 recapitulates verse 26, and I believe both verses speak about both things, both what the Romans did and what the Jews did. So I actually do agree with you as well. So,
Yeah.
but I'll keep playing them. But it sounds like he's giving so much ground already. He's saying, yeah, the 70th week did happen in a sense in uh, the first century, which really, I mean, it's hard to get past that now. I already see it as a defeated position.
Right. So essentially, what he does, and throughout the rest of this, if you want a brief summary, he he'll go to this text and say, well, it's a 70th week, but it's not the 70th week. Basically, that type of distinction. It's the first, but not the final fulfillment of that specific prophecy. And so he takes that to be future. And he says, well, you have to take that position based on his understanding of uh, Matthew 24, that's a dual prophecy. And so if that's a dual prophecy, then so does 70th week of Daniel have to be a dual prophecy. And then basically he tries to argue for the he being, I think Titus or one of the Roman generals, one of those, to be the to be the person who is the prince here.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's just
And the way he gets at it, he goes to like Daniel 7, Daniel 12, and says, well, that's not about Christ, is it? So then why does Daniel 9 have to be? So
yeah.
as short as I can like succinctly describe it, that's essentially what he's trying to say. And well, those aren't about him, so why does this have to be?
Right. Right. Okay, I'll let him play.
They breached the walls, they destroyed the temple, and as a result, they literally stopped the animal sacrifices, because the Jews were still sacrificing animals after Jesus was cut off, after he rose. They still sacrificed animals, right? But in 70 AD, right in the middle of that war, the temple was destroyed, and the result of that was a literal stopping to the animal sacrifices. So notice this, we go into verse 27, and I would take that he that pronoun he right back to the prince,
prince.
people of the prince. But notice how well this fits history. So this is historical, contextual, and grammatical.
Hold on, but
Now, I don't know what you think about this, but if you read verse 26 and 27, if you understand it as I do, that the verse 27 recapitulates more or less what verse 26 says. You have in verse 26, and the people of Prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. That seems to be an ending of sacrifices right there. But then in verse 27, you have the making of a strong covenant is what puts an
Right.
end to sacrifice and offering. So there's almost like I guess you say in a like a theological sense or a spiritual sense, the sacrifices were ended by the death, burial, resurrection, and then literally physically in 70 AD they were stopped.
Yeah. Well, one of the objections he brings up, by the way, in this video is, well, Christ didn't make a covenant for 1 week. He made it for eternity.
Yes. Yes.
So, when I heard that, I was like, it's not telling you the duration of the covenant. It's saying when that covenant was established. It was established for 1 week.
Exactly. He for 1 week he made it strong, confirmed it, established it.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you the duration of the covenant. So when
Exactly.
I heard that, I was like, my head was already hurting by this point. So, like, forgive me for not giving a coherent response to this, but yeah, I just thought it was pretty bad, man.
No, you're good. There was before you and I met. There were a number of videos that I did on Daniel chapter 9 uh, with myself and with others, and so it was interesting to see this premiere on, and I saw it on my live feed. So I was like, it's been a while. I haven't been in Daniel for a while. I'll review the video. So
And
there is a pause
well,
point
I
here.
want to
Let
finish my
him
point here.
finish.
So, pseudonym,
Hold
I
on.
know you're excited.
I
Let me
want to
finish.
hear.
I will say I was cracking up every time that pseudonym guy kept interrupting. It was it was funny. It was good.
He is comedy, man.
Yeah.
And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Covenant, a synonym for covenant is league. Daniel 11 describes Antiochus Epiphanes as making a league with many. We know in history that Antiochus Epiphanes made a league with apostate Jews at the time, Jews that did not really believe in the one true God. They were apostate. They were tired of being cursed, tired of the Gentile nations coming in and basically messing with them, destroying them. And so they made a league. They made a covenant with Antiochus Epiphanes. You can read about this in First Maccabees as well. And so it says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week. So notice, in the midst of this 7-year period.
So was he trying to say there that it's the same kind of thing, just recapitulated here?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Except he's taking it to be when he takes the recapitulation, he's taking it as a future prophecy and a past prophecy. That it has happened in 8070, but there's going to be a future, a more globalized version of what happened in 8070 in the future.
I meant with Antiochus when he mentioned that. Is he trying to like build his case there, saying, well, see, it happened with Antiochus. They made this covenant or this league, and here we're seeing it repeated again.
Essentially, except he's taking it with another Roman general.
Yeah.
This is weeks of years. He shall cause the sacrifice.
See that I gotta say this. That assumes that every time that it talks about a covenant like that in Book Daniel, it has to refer to the same type of thing or the being made with the same type of individual, that is Antichrist.
Yeah.
Rather, the context of whenever that is being used should tell us who it's being made with.
Yeah, that was my point when I responded to him, by the way. My point was you have to let the prophecy in its context actually give you what it's referring to. You can't just assume it's referring to something and just squish it onto the text.
Well, but don't you know that's how internet apologetics works, John? Come on now.
What's up, Ryan?
Grace and peace,
Oh,
you're right.
not much. I hope my mic is not blaringly loud.
No, it's fine.
Oh, good. I see StreamYard finally is getting along with my Firefox. That's great.
All right, unless you got something to say, Ryan, I'm gonna continue.
Oh no, I can't wait to hear Donny fling the covenant blessings that belong to us in Christ today, 2,000 years into the future, and then insinuate that John is wrong for believing the scripture.
Yeah.
Oh, essentially, Ryan, his view is this dual prophecy, dual fulfillment idea.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I know. He's tried to force many an amillennial debate with me, despite that I said to him, you don't understand the position. Go educate yourself first, and then we might debate.
But yeah, we can continue.
Sacrifice and the oblation to cease. This literally happened. A 7-year Jewish-Roman war, 66 to 73 AD, predicted 600 years BC, because Daniel was written in 600 BC, I believe. Your seculars have to try and put it somewhere in 2nd century BC.
So we left untold.
And
Then it's done. Your position isn't supported by this text. If this literally happened in 70 AD, then again, Donny, the position that you're trying to force onto this text is not there. It's not supported because you're admitting this happened already. So
But
any presupposition
Sola,
that you have onto the text,
it's a double prophecy, don't you know?
right? You see that in verse 28.
But Sola, things in the New Testament and the Old Testament may or may not apply, and we always use the Old Testament to interpret the New. Don't you know that?
Ah, I had it backwards. Dang it. All this time.
so this fits history perfectly. Jesus is cut off, and then shortly after we have the 7-year Jewish-Roman war. The people of the prince comes in. We know that Titus, the Roman legion, they destroy the temple, and as a result, the sacrifice literally stops in the middle of the week. And that's what it says in Daniel 27, that it's in the middle of the week that this man will cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And so do you see how all of that fits like a glove? But once you start trying to interpret Messiah as being the he in verse 27, then I believe it starts to fall apart. John, if you wanted to speak to that, go ahead, brother.
What?
Now it doesn't have to fall apart at all. If you understand if you hold to the position I do, the people, the prince of the Jews who desecrated the temple before the Romans even came in, and the Romans are mentioned as well in these verses, but they are the determined that are poured out upon the desolate. The desolate are the Jews. They're the ones who become desolate because the abominations, and that determined end is poured out upon them.
Well, now I'm just slightly confused because if you take that to actually be historical, then that would, even if you take the he to be, Titus, that is still like passed to us, right?
Yeah,
that wouldn't be our future.
Yeah, I could address that.
Good point, John.
Firstly, here's all the sources.
My brain was still functioning just a little bit. So.
It's all good. If you just woke up, I think you said you did. I can't even form a sentence when I just wake up. So
I think I
to be young and have my recall like that again.
Exactly.
Well, I'm pretty sure I was up for like 30 something hours by this point.
Oh,
my
man.
brain was fuming. So
oh man,
yeah.
I'd probably just sit there and be like, you know what, Donny, you're right. I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, if you ever wondered why I never debated Donny on this subject, and said I would tell him, Donny, I've had no sleep. I cannot concentrate. He'd want to debate immediately.
Oh, yeah. I'm not a good debater in general. I can, it's hard for me to stay focused, and then if I get no sleep on top of it, It's game over. Whoever I'm against won by default. All right, here we go.
7-year Jewish-Roman War. And
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I would agree with that.
right here. Well, see, a lot of people, they have a misunderstanding on that war. They think it only lasted 3 to 3.5 years till 70. No, 70 AD was not the end of that war.
Yeah,
The war went on to 73 AD, 7
I
years.
agree.
So, okay, that's good. And so
Hold on, can I say something?
I would argue that this is a localized fulfillment.
No,
It's
be
a shadow
quiet,
fulfillment.
pseudonym.
For the audience sake, notice first Maccabees.
You guys just totally /ignore.
Uh-huh.
That's good.
Oh man.
Not taking this as authoritative, but it is interesting. Notice how it says in verse 11, let us go and make a covenant. So my whole point is
Well, we already know that in chapter 11, it talks about that as well, too. You know, I'm not sure what the point is of going to. I mean, it's nice to have the historical documents like First, Second Maccabees, Josephus, and that one historian. His name starts with a B. I can't remember. I don't know. But those sources are nice. But I mean, chapter 11 talks about that as well, too. But that was with Antiochus. So I'm wondering where he's going with this.
we have types of Antichrist. And so, John, would you agree? I'll ask you a quick series of questions. Would you agree that Antiochus Epiphanes set up the transgression of desolation in 2nd century BC?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
How would you guys? Would you still say yeah to that question?
Well, he threw me off for this question because I didn't entirely know what he was talking about. So I was being tired. I was like, sure, I'll grant it, see where it leads me.
So in chapter 8, we'll start at verse 11. It says, it became great, it referring to little horn, who's Antiochus, even as great as the prince of hosts, and the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. And a host will be given over to it, together with the regular burnt offering, because of transgression. And it will throw truth to the ground, and it will act and prosper. Now, I don't know if you want me to share my screen while I'm reading or not, but I can.
It's up to you, man.
Yeah, just so you can follow in the audience, if there's an audience they can follow. All right. So, and a host will be given over to it, together with the regular burnt offering, because of transgression, and it will throw truth to the ground. This referring to Antiochus, and it will act and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, for how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the going over of the sanctuary and host to be trampled underfoot? So that's what he's referring to right here, is the transgression that makes desolate in chapter 8.
Got it.
So you would still hold to it being Antiochus, or you're not sure?
Well, I would have to do more reading on him. But like I said, in the moment, I was just going with it just to see where he would take me with that sort of rabbit trail.
These are his baiting questions. He's trying to get you to agree to a set of premises so he thinks he can get you to agree to his position and then try to pull the rug out under you.
Right.
So here in chapter 11, verse 31, forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. So he'll probably go here as well too, which this would be Antiochus as well, in my opinion. So I mean, again, I would agree with that, but I would also make note that it's because of transgressions that this even happens, which are committed by the Jews, and we'll see. You see that if you read down here later in the chapter, or later in the chapter 8, I think verses 19, 20, 21, you will read that it's actually the Jews who were filling up the cup of iniquity, so to speak, and the curses were put out upon them, and God raised up the little horn to do that. So it'd be both, in my opinion. So, all right, and I assume, Ryan, you'd agree.
I would have to do far more research into the particulars of that.
That's fair. All right, we'll continue.
Would you agree that Antiochus Epiphanes, as per history and also Daniel 8, 11, and 12, he took away the daily sacrifice?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. You can see here Daniel 8, right?
Yeah.
And host was given him against the daily sacrifice. So Antiochus Epiphanes was against the daily sacrifice. And it says by him in verse 11. Well, by who? The little horn that came out of the Grecian Empire, specifically the Seleucid Empire. He took away the daily sacrifice. Would you also agree that Antiochus Epiphanes offered up a pig on the altar as a replacement sacrifice?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I got questions.
No. Hey, listen. I'm engaging
Look,
John for a little bit. Okay. You and I have had plenty of discussions on this. And so my last question is, would you agree that Antiochus Epiphanes, right here we can see Daniel 11, he exalted himself, he magnified himself above every god. He basically claimed to be that they've unearthed coins, gold coins of Antiochus Epiphanes, where he's depicted as God manifest. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and as a quick note, by the way, 2 Thessalonians, I take that to be Nero.
Okay.
I don't know who that was, man, but having all these people there, like he just talked
It's
over you.
I know.
Oh,
I think
man.
you had said, John, I believe that you believe that in the Man of Sin, this clip is Nero.
Right. I take it to be Emperor Nero.
So what's interesting, I'll point this out, is that he is, what I understand, he is saying that verse 36 of chapter 11 is referring to Antiochus.
Mm-hmm.
So my position is it switches from the third kingdom to the fourth kingdom in verse 35 to 36. And I won't get into that because it'll take a very long time. 35 is the last verse that refers to the third beast, that is Greece. Verse 36 is the first verse that talks about the fourth beast, that is Rome. So it's interesting that he holds this to be the third kingdom still.
So you take that to be Nero. Would you agree that Antiochus Epiphanes is a type of Antichrist?
That's fine.
Okay, because Antichrist literally means in the place
Just
of
against
Christ.
Christ.
No, I would agree with that. I agree that the Antiochus was a type, a shadow, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's not against Christ. See,
what?
it's not the same thing as, I'm anti-abortion or I'm anti-evolution, where I'm against something. Antichrist in the Bible means in the place of.
Okay.
And
Well,
No.
Antiochus Epiphanes.
No.
no.
It's
First
in
John
the
6.
stead of or against. It does mean anti doesn't change in Latin or Greek. It means against. An antichrist is the one or something that is against Christ.
Yeah, I remember John identifies this as the one denying the Father and the Son in First John. This is the Antichrist, the one who is denying them. And remember what Jesus says about those who deny him. They are his enemies. They are against him.
Yeah, that sounds against, yeah. But I mean, I would be more okay with saying against and in the place of. I mean, they seem to complement one another.
Yeah.
He claimed to be God manifest. He was in the place of God.
Well,
The Bible says God was manifest in the flesh.
Again, Antiochus would not only be in the place of, he was replacing Yahweh. He's trying to replace Yahweh, his sacrifices, his feasts, his everything, his holy convocations. So he'd be against as well as in the place of, or replacing.
God
Right.
was manifest in the flesh, which is Jesus Christ. He claimed to be God, right? So it's not
Well-
necessarily against something, it's in the place of. John, go ahead. What are your thoughts, brother?
Well, when Antichrist is described in 1 John 2, it's expressly referred to as the one who denies the Father and the Son.
Right. No.
Them.
Right. And that's where I'm getting my definition. Who is he that denied that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist that denied that Jesus is the Christ, right? If you don't have the Son, you don't have the Father. Who is a
That's
liar but he
apology.
that denied that Jesus is the Christ? So the point
Right,
is,
so that
but
would
who's the
technically
ones that
mean
who's the ones that are denying that Jesus is the Christ? Who are the ones that are denying that Messiah has come?
those who are against him?
What's the Jews? That's who John is right speaking to at that.
Exactly, and they were against him.
Right. The Jews.
That was a-
Johnny's being a dupe because, again, the Romans were not pro-Christ either.
No.
But it is, the audience was predominantly Jewish, but we can't just assume the Jews are the only ones who are the Antichrists. This is that
Yeah.
Steven Anderson anti-Semitic nonsense that he's bought into.
Yeah.
And even worse, this is what happens when tiredness gets to you. You start to not think straight. So I granted a lot of things in this discussion I shouldn't have, which is why I was kind of flabbergasted as to why he posted this again. Because he had posted this before initially, like when right after we had the conversation. But then he premiered it again not too long ago. I don't know why, but
Yeah, the second time was on another channel that I don't know if it's his channel or another channel that premieres everything he does, or a lot of stuff he does. It's the Young Earth Creation channel. I forget what it's called.
yeah.
Well,
No, that is what it is called, Young Earth Creation.
oh, okay, yeah. Is that his channel or is that somebody else's channel?
No, that is another dude that's dealing with him. I can't remember his name. It might be Robert, but I'm probably wrong.
Okay, and this is the one by the Young Earth Creation channel that premiered, and I saw it on my stream. So I didn't see the other one the first time. All right, here we go.
That point, there's only one group of people that would
He's
agree
right.
there's a
Yeah,
Messiah
so-
coming. Just wait, there's a lot of overtalk. There's one group of people that agree a Messiah is coming, but that Jesus is not the Messiah. But those are
He's right to the
Jews.
Gentiles.
The Jews are waiting for their Messiah. We're waiting for the second coming of Christ. Who are they waiting for? They're waiting for Antichrist, but he is going to be in the place of Christ.
Well, that's an
He's not actually
assumption.
going to be
Gentiles.
Christ. And so that's why the Bible defines Antichrist as being in the place of, because it's
No,
referring to the Jews.
That's not only a total assumption, that is missing the point. There were 8 major Messiah figures who appeared until the Christ appeared. We read about a couple of them in the book of the Acts. Donny totally doesn't get it. The Jews are not waiting for Antichrist. They're waiting for Christ. They think whoever will be their Messiah is to come. They miss out. Some of them are messianic, and that they acknowledge a Messiah. Many of them are not. But it totally bombed out on that one.
Yeah, I didn't follow his. I don't think his argumentation there was good. It's a pretty weak argument.
Well, I know where he's getting this. It's Steven Anderson. He's pretty much cloned Steven Anderson's eschatology as his own.
Oof.
And despite the fact that he's been told, Donny, this is basically a dispensationalism light, he doesn't want to hear that. He doesn't want to listen.
Here we go.
Who is a liar but he that denied that Jesus is the Christ? Well, atheists don't believe there is a Christ coming. They don't believe that there is a Messiah, but the Jews do. And who they believe the Messiah is going to be is actually an imposter. He's in the place of.
An atheist, by definition, denies that Jesus is the Christ. How is he not, in his natural state, an antichrist?
Right. Like that was my whole point of bringing that up. Like that's why I think First John is so important, especially with free grace, because that is a key issue between us. He's actually trying to construe the Antichrist as just the Jews. And I was like, but the substantival participles there define every person who is denying the Father and the Son. The Muslims deny the Father and the Son. You know, the Buddhists, the Hindus, and all these different religions, especially atheists. Whether or not they say they believe in God is a different question. The fact is, they deny the true God.
Yep.
But you can continue.
Of Christ. Anyways, I think we're getting off on that too much.
I know what you mean, but I take what you mean by that as just meaning against Christ. To place yourself in the position of Christ is to be fundamentally against him. I think it's just
as a result,
right.
You're against Christ.
Right.
They would believe that the Antichrist is Christ. Antichrist is in the place of. He's an imposter, basically. He's a false Christ.
Right. So I'm fine with saying that.
Okay.
That's
not
just
even
what I took it to.
eschatology. That's soteriology. Doesn't make any sense anymore.
Pseudonym, be quiet.
So
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. That was a good timing.
It's funny when Kevin gets annoyed, because when he gets annoyed, he just doesn't care. Shut up, pseudonym.
Yeah, that was good. That was pretty funny. That was good.
Here's my wrap up. Everything Antiochus Epiphanes did, he took away the daily sacrifice. He set up the transgression of desolation. He offered a pig on the altar. He claimed to be God, right? He shall exalt him, right here, Daniel 11. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of God. 2 Thessalonians 2, the man of sin, same thing. We'll get to your idea that that's Nero. I would disagree with that. Okay. He also, Daniel 8 talks about, I got a slide here somewhere, but Daniel 8 talks about how the Antichrist, he has power, but not of himself. It's basically power and influence given by the dragon. We understand in Revelation 13, the little horn, the Antichrist, it's the same thing. Okay. So all of these things tell me that it is ultimately the dragon. He is the one that gives influence and power to these Antichrist types. So you've had appetizers. Yeah, you've had the Antiochus Epiphanes, Titus, Nero, and in the...
Well, they are powered by Satan, yes. But what does, for example, chapter 8 say? Let me get to the verse. We'll start in chapter 8 of Daniel, verse 18. And when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand up. He said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation. For it refers to the appointed time of the end. So indignation is what in Scripture? It's
wrath.
Exactly. When it's in this kind of context, it's God's wrath being poured out upon... let me find the verse, if I can find it real quick. On those who have filled the cup full. Let me see if I can find the verse, though. But yeah, it's ultimately, like he says, ultimately Satan. No, it's God who brings the little horn to power to punish those who have transgressed. Oh, here we go.
It's like Isaiah 10.
I think we have here a total denial of God's sovereignty. But then again, Donny is also a Pelagian, so that doesn't surprise me.
Here in verse 23 is the verse I was looking for. It says, "At the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of bold face, that is the little horn, one who understands riddles shall arise." So it is when the transgressors have reached their limit, God's indignation is poured out and the little horn arises. I wanted to point that out. So
Exactly.
In the future, you're going to have the end game Antichrist. We've had local fulfillments. We're going to have the main course in the future. And so when we get to Daniel 9:27, I believe this is a
What?
shadow. Okay. This is a shadow.
There it is. It's a foreshadow.
Right.
It's a type of what will be a greater fulfillment in the future. And he uses the foreshadows of Christ in scripture to say, well, see, this is a biblical idea.
No, it's not.
Like, come
He's
on.
assuming that. You cannot take the types of Christ, Noah, Daniel, Job, David, and apply that. Say, well, if there are types of Christ in the Bible, then there have to be types of Antichrist. No, you can't do that.
Right. And so that was my issue when I heard him bring this up. He's taking ideas of dual fulfillment in the sense of like the prophecies concerning Christ, or there's prophecies.
And by
that
the
are-
way, dispensationalists, when they interpret these passages, don't do that. They don't just clone the types of Christ, assuming that, well, if there's the one thing, then there should be the inverse in the other. That's not how they work.
yeah, and so that's the issue that I had. The main critique. You don't get the futuristic part of the duality from Daniel 9.
exactly.
And he has to prove that. The best that he could do is say, well, there's other prophecies that are unquestionably dually prophetic. Therefore, why can't we do the same in Daniel 9? Like,
Right.
I think that's just very, very lazy exegesis.
Well, may I also highlight that if Daniel 9, verse 27, is pointing to foreshadowing, was Christ actually crucified or not?
Right.
Albeit Donny will say yes, he cannot maintain his position and do that. You must say he either A, did so, or he B, did not do so, because you can't be half the Messiah and half not. You must fully be the Messiah. If this is only a foreshadowing, then we should allegorize the entire block of Daniel's chapters 7 through 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm happy that he is inconsistent on this part. He does say verse 24, 25, and I think part of
26.
26, or if
Yeah.
not all, is referring to the atonement. So I'm glad he's inconsistent on that part. But unfortunately, because he's inconsistent, it actually destroys his position, because verse 24 says what? 70 weeks. So if you're saying that is about the atonement, that means all
Right.
70 weeks refer to that. And at the end of 70 weeks is when the atonement is accomplished.
Exactly.
Well, by definition, what he's saying, though, is that if this is a foreshadowing and 70 weeks were accomplished upon your people, then he has to inconsistently hold. And you are right. Thank God that's the case. Otherwise, he'd have to deny the crucifixion.
Yeah. And right, I don't know if you were here when I brought this up, but he ends up bringing up the objection. Well, this can't be about Christ because, well, the covenant was made for 1 week.
He said it
Not
can't be
eternally.
about Christ. What does he think a Messiah
says-
is? What do you think Christ means?
He thinks the he here refers to the prince, and he doesn't take the
okay.
Messiah to be the prince here.
John,
because
I'm
takes
very, forgive me, I'm very stupid. But doesn't it say Messiah the Prince?
yes, but he that's where he makes a distinction between Messiah the Prince and the Prince who is to come, which is completely unjustified in my opinion. But when he says the confirm the covenant with the many for 1 week, he says, well, Christ made an eternal covenant. He didn't make a 1 week covenant. And so,
That's
see, it can't be about Jesus. Okay,
that's
look,
harsh.
like you don't have to have, a college level reading comprehension to tell that that's not what this is talking about.
Well, even if we were to, um,
No.
in
Sorry, I
the-
was muted, but go ahead.
oh, I would say even if we're going to say, okay, well, let's see if your position is correct. Let's look in the New Testament. Where in the New Testament do we see anything about a covenant?
We see quite a bit, but it's not the same covenant as the covenant that Donnie's talking about.
Exactly. There's only mention of a new covenant that Christ makes with his people. That fits
Exactly.
perfectly here.
And that's just the issue. He's taking the the people of the prince to be the Romans, and he's saying, well, Jesus isn't the Romans aren't his people. So see, it can't be about Christ.
But who? But here, how do you do that? It's not a prince is not separated. It's Messiah the Prince. Donnie graduated, and I think he might have even gone to university. He was a nurse, so apparently he's capable of reading. How does he do that?
The only argument they have that I'm aware is the antecedent argument.
Yeah, and the problem is the only antecedent is Messiah the Prince. That's the issue.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time taking Donnie seriously when he's saying this because Messiah, I don't understand it. Messiah the Prince. How he has said in his own debates and on his own channel, on Praise channel, what have you, numerous times that Jesus means Messiah. So who is Messiah the Prince if he's not Jesus?
Well, he takes Messiah the Prince to be about Christ in verse 26. He just says that the once the Messiah is cut off, the people of the prince refers to a different person. And that
Yeah,
specifically is
that's my
Titus
well,
for
but
him.
John, that's my point. Messiah the Prince, typically speaking, by most premills, including most dispensationalists, isn't interpreted to be a separate person. You know that. So how is this
Yeah.
suddenly a
This
separate
is
person?
this is where his view contradicts their view, because he is making a distinction there. And so it's a wildly unique perspective that violates the grammar.
Well, I also raised the point of Titus chapter 3, verses 9 through 11 that warn us about heretical conclusions. Now, normally, if someone had a cockamamie conclusion about scripture, I may not care. But this is where we have to be highly concerned because, again, although Donnie does not deny that Jesus hanged on the cross, he basically just denied the Christ and denied the new covenant with this interpretation.
Yeah, and if he was if he was consistent, I think he would have very problematic conclusions. But that's why, like Solar said, I think it's good that he's not consistent with that.
Yeah. I'd rather him stay inconsistent and hold his position and not be consistent with his position.
Yeah.
All right.
I third.
Of your end time 7-year period that is going to be global in extent. This is a localized fulfillment. This is a Daniel 70th week, but it's not the ultimate fulfillment. The ultimate
is.
fulfillment will be in the future with your future Antichrist, who does all the same things.
Now, I'll say that's obviously all presupposed in the text, but you can have a future Antichrist. I mean, even the all-mill position, there's the end-time Antichrist and all that in the all-mill camp, which I hold to. And you don't have to have a future 70-week inserted into the text here. I don't
Yeah,
understand why he needs to have this so bad. It's crazy.
yeah, and it really. That's why I always say when it comes to eschatology, I think the heart of the issue is Matthew 24, because Donnie's, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, the only reason he's saying this is because he takes Matthew 24 to be a dual prophecy about 80,
Yeah.
70, and the future. So he has to say that. If he says this is solely a historic event, then he couldn't apply a future dual part of Matthew 24 in the future. I think he has to actually do that for
Yeah.
his Matthew 24 to work.
Yeah, might be right. All right.
Than Antiochus Epiphanes did. So my question to you, John, and feel free to take as much time as you need, because you've been very patient with me. If you agree that it was Antiochus.
Now, when this was premiering, I did comment when that baby was crying. I'm like, look, even the baby's disagreeing with Donny. I don't know if you saw that or not.
The baby's crying from all the heresy.
Yeah, right. All the eisegesis.
Yeah, you're making the baby cry, Donny.
Antiochus Epiphanes, who I would argue it's through the dragon. He's the one that did all these things. I think someone needs
Yes.
to mute. There's a little bit of
You're saying
background
you're
noise
wrong, Donny.
So
Pseudonym. Pseudonym. Mute your microphone. My gosh.
pseudonym, there's a mute button and it's not very difficult to click it. Or praise. Maybe you can mute him for us. Okay.
Pseudonym
So
made his child cry.
That was epic.
Oh God,
Oh man.
that is hilarious. Donnie's heresy is so bad it made the babe cry.
Babe was protesting and cries.
Oh man.
Well, but you see, the problem is, and herein is the crux of the matter. Has Donnie even read the Roman Catholic position on Daniel 9? Does he even understand what the Jews believe about Antichrist? Or has he read any actual Protestant scholasticism on the subject? I've asked him these questions before. He'll dodge them, but if you pin him, he'll actually admit no. He has never actually read anything beyond the presentations by Stephen Anderson. The trouble with this is that the historic Christian position has been on 9 verse 27 that Messiah the Prince being cut off refers to Christ, and there is no getting around that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But continue.
Yes, pseudonym's bad eschatology and bad soteriology made his kid cry. So I just want to see justification
Sure with pseudonym?
for why we should interpret.
I was going to say, are you sure it's pseudonym?
Well, go ahead.
Now this guy's comment is definitely important. The already and not yet is very crucial to understand.
Yeah.
For Daniel 9:27, the one who's making a covenant and the one who's taken away the daily sacrifice. Why is this a good thing? Why is this Messiah when Daniel 8, Daniel 11, Daniel 12, history have all confirmed that it was Antiochus Epiphanes that did all these things? He's the one that confirmed the covenant. He's the one that took away the daily sacrifice. He's the one that set up the transgression of desolation, and he's a shadow of the future Antichrist. John, go ahead.
That's
Before
an
you
assumption.
answer, well, before you answer in that, John, it's yeah, during the reign of the third beast that happened. Yeah, Antiochus did that. Where are you getting the idea that it has to be a carbon copy in the fourth beast?
Yeah.
That's presupposed.
Right. This is his faulty presupposition.
And this
Very
is what I like to call the back and forth of Jesus. It's the laden flowers hermeneutic, where you go from Romans 11 to Acts 26 to Isaiah something, and then all of a sudden we're back in Romans 9 and have no idea what
Well,
it's talking about.
I think he does it on purpose because he actually thinks this is what exegetes his belief. It's not, but you pretty much have to do this to confuse your opponent into agreeing into this. Because if you look very carefully, what would Romans 9 have to do with Daniel 9?
Well, nothing. But my point was about laden flowers, what he did in the Romans 9 debate.
Right,
How
right.
he
But
went over
I'm
it.
I'm saying I've been in a similar discussion at Praise's channel with Donny, and that's what he'll do. He'll take you through all kinds of different New Testament texts that he tries to correlate back to Daniel 9, but none of them have anything to do with Daniel 9.
Yeah, and that was my objection. You can't just go everywhere else and then squish all of those contexts into Daniel 9, because Daniel 9 24 through 27 is a standalone prophecy. This is not a prophecy that's contingent upon any other one. The standalone prophecy that is specific to the 70th week. There's no duality here. So that was my contention. But
Hey, real quick, John, when was this interaction? When did this interaction with you and Donnie happen?
I honestly couldn't recall. You would have to go on Standing for Truth channel when it first aired. But it was quite a while back. It was when I first got this new camera of mine. That's why my camera's so close in front of my face here.
Oh, okay. All right. There's a comment in live chat that Chris was kind of curious when this happened. All right, I'll continue.
How do you contextually argue that Daniel 9:27 is Messiah? Go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry I have to stop it again, but he brought all these different chapters, chapter 11, chapter 12,
I know.
whatever else he mentioned. And then he said, how do you contextually?
Well,
None of
he's
that
going
is a
to.
context.
He said he sets you up because he's going to set you up that the minute you go outside of Daniel 9 through 11, you're not doing this contextually. So he can then try to claim you're being sloppy. In point of fact, what he's doing is some of the sloppiest hermeneutics ever. He just doesn't want you to realize that.
Well, if he said contextually, that would assume that he's saying the verses in chapter 11 is actually about the fourth beast, but he said earlier it's about the third beast. It's confusing.
Well, I'm just going to say this as politely as I can. He's making this stuff up, dude.
Yeah. Basically. But you can continue. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I just think it operates on the assumption that there's two people in Daniel 9. And that was the main thing that I was trying to point out that I disagree with. I think there's one person mentioned here. I don't think the phrase "and the people of the prince who is to come" is another person. I think it's the same one who's cut off.
You think it's Jesus?
Right. So I think the prince who is to come is the Messiah that was prophesied to do these things.
So you're saying Messiah destroyed the city?
Right. So I believe Messiah sent the Roman armies to surround Jerusalem and to then destroy them.
But wait a minute, John. The Roman armies are not the people of the prince. We are the people of the prince. Those that have faith in Jesus Christ, we are the people of God, whether Jew or Gentile. It says the people of, you can't say, now the Roman army, you could say we're an instrument of God's judgment. You can't say that.
May I make a comment? Did he just deny that the Jews were God's covenant people and that appropriately, when the scripture is being fulfilled, the covenant people of God would have been the Hebrews?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is this the result of Steven Anderson's anti-Semitism that basically you have to ignore the fact that no, the church existed in the wilderness? That's true. But when God here is talking about his covenant people, He's not talking about the Gentiles yet.
Yeah, but to be fair with him though, he did say the Romans. He was saying that the Romans aren't God's people. We are.
Yes, but you do know what he's doing though. He's assuming by saying we're God's people. Yes, you're jumping ahead of probably a good, I don't know, 3 to 4 decades into the New Testament. This at that time had not yet been fleshed out. The covenant people, when this would have applied in the Messiah's day, would have been the Jews and the sojourners among them, not necessarily the Romans.
Yeah, and he's just trying to say, well, the Romans aren't his people, so how could they be the ones to destroy the Jews? Essentially, is his objection.
Well, because they did. How
Well,
could they be the ones to destroy the Jews? Because they did. That is what God did before the diaspora occurred. God destroyed the Jewish people, and he used the Roman Empire to do it.
Yeah, and that was my point. But I think that's where his denial of, I believe, the consistent understanding of God's sovereignty comes in, because he has no way to understand a decree, which is in this chapter, by the way, Daniel 9:27.
Yep.
Desolations are determined.
And 26.
Yeah.
If you look here in 26, it kind of, if he's going to do all this connecting with chapter 8, chapter 11, 12, which all premillennial believers do this kind of jumping back and forth. SDAs do it as well. So I'm kind of familiar with it. If you use that hermeneutic, right? Remember back in chapter 8 when I pointed out that it was the transgressors that were filling up their transgressions. And once that was full, then the indignation came and the little horn rose up. I think something similar here is happening, right? The people of the prince, who would be Messiah, so would be his people. Remember in verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, and that refers to the Jews, into Jerusalem, into the temple, to finish transgressions. So, and this refers to his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension. So it's these transgressors that are his people that come, and go ahead.
So how you would have answered this is the Jews, the people. So that's the Jews who are coming to destroy Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
well,
then,
I think that's what threw him off, because I said the Romans. To be fair,
it'd be both. It'd be both. It's not either or. It'd be both, because, like you pointed out, the end thereof shall be with a flood, and the end of the war, this is a little different translation than mine, end of the war, desolations are determined. So the desolators,
Right.
or excuse me, the transgressors, who are his people, have desolations determined upon them. If you read earlier in chapter 9, when Daniel is praying, he's praying because desolations were poured out upon God's people, the Jews. And what for? Because of the transgressions.
Yeah, that was where my sleepiness and my brain cells being fried at the time didn't allow me to catch that. But yeah, that's probably what threw me off in this conversation.
The people of God.
Well, I think that's just a category, because in apocalyptic judgment comings in the Old Testament, you like the judgment upon Babylon and Egypt, and like Isaiah 13 and other passages, it is said that they're
It says they were an instrument of God's judgment. They weren't the people of God. Yeah, I'm saying
they could be considered the
no.
people of God in that regard.
No, they
to
can't.
that extent.
No, you'd be inferring that the people of God are those that have faith in Jesus Christ.
That's theological, though.
Isn't it funny that he let you talk until he disagreed vehemently with you?
Yes.
Yeah, and my point wasn't that they are his people in a covenantal sense. My point was That's not what it's necessarily addressing at this point. It could just be referring to them as his people with respect to them carrying out what he planned for them.
Right. Here again, Donny does not have a concept of that. God held Cyrus's hand in Isaiah 45, and he was his in the sense of that he executed God's will. It doesn't necessarily mean that that Cyrus was converted to Yahweh, or even Nebuchadnezzar for that matter.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Nebuchadnezzar was, God says he was his servant.
Yeah, and yet he wasn't necessarily converted.
Yeah. All right.
Logical
Notice this.
conclusion. Now, I agree that we are the people of the prince.
I think it's a false inference to say that the people of the prince is Jesus, and the Roman legion is the people of again, they're an instrument of God carrying out his judgment, but you couldn't say that they're the people of God. Notice this on my slide.
Well,
on
then
June
what are they, Donny?
5th, 7th.
That would have been the question I would have asked him. If they're not God's people, then what are they?
Well, his point was he takes the people of the prince to be the Roman prince Titus, so that they're the people of Titus.
I get that, but what I'm saying is that right here is where Donny basically denied divine sovereignty, and I don't know if he realizes what he did.
Yeah.
70 AD, during the siege of Jerusalem, Titus and his Roman legions breached the city, the people of the prince. History has already confirmed that after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the people of the prince came in, destroyed the temple, destroyed the city.
Now, again, this is why I think my position, although it is a minority position, kind of refutes that. Is go read Josephus' book 4 of the Jewish Wars, or Wars of the Jews. You'll read about Eleazar, and you read about John of Giscala. I hold to the John of Giscala position personally, but read about what him and his merry band of zealots did before the Romans breached anything. You'll see that they already destroyed the sanctuary, the holy place, and most holy place, way before the Romans even did.
Now, for those of us who've not read it, what's the significance of it?
Lots, and it has to do also with what chapter 11 talks about. But he did everything from before he even got to the sanctuary. He did bandit type of stuff. He'd rape the women,
terrible
murder
stuff.
people, terrorize, steal. Then they captured the priesthood and slaughtered all the priesthood at the temple. Then they took the most holy place and destroyed all the furniture and made it into a fortress, because they're fighting with other Jews at the time, other zealots and the other non-zealot Jews. They had homosexual acts and activities. They had men dressing as women in the sanctuary, in the holy place, the most holy place.
So God sending the Romans really was fitting, because it wasn't just a judgment against the Jews in general. It was a judgment possibly because of what you're describing.
Yeah, that would be my position, but it is a minority position. I do understand that, but
I would say it's both. I would say you could say it's upon them and upon the Jewish leaders of Matthew 23, because that's the broader scope in which it was made. But I think it could also be applicable specifically to those people as well.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I'd agree.
So yeah, that's interesting. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
About this throughout historical documentation, Titus and his Roman legions, they breached the city's middle wall, right in the middle of that 7-year Jewish-Roman war. And I find people who take your position, it's all just a big coincidence, apparently, that, notice here, in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. Well, who? Goes back to the people of the prince. Yeah, Commander Titus and his Roman legion came in right in the middle of the war, 3.5 years in. The war was 7 years, destroyed the temple, and as a result, stopped the sacrifices. Was this all a coincidence to you then, John?
Okay, so even if we accept that as fact, you just refuted your own future 70th week.
And
Correct.
even worse,
Well-
if we believe that Matthew 23 is a judgment from God, then
Yes.
even if we take that Titus and his legions were the ones doing it in the event, it's still God's judgment. It's still God's wrath poured upon them. So we could still say God ceased the sacrifices
Correct.
by those means.
I don't know if Donny realized it, but what he just used was actually a full preterist argument. So congratulations, Donny. You don't know this, but you just employed a full preterist argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add, that's why in verse 26 it says desolations are decreed, and in verse 27 it says the decreed end is poured out on the desolator.
Yeah. Brother,
Sorry
you
if I
know
sound
love you.
aggressive. It's just frustrating because
Brother.
we have a beautiful fulfilled prophecy here, but now you're going to have to deny it.
No. Here's where my theological view comes in. I do believe that God is the one who's determining these things. And as it said at the end, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate.
Yeah.
Right? I believe God is the one determining it. Right?
Well,
so
this
even
is
if you
Bible
want to
prophecy.
even
These
wait,
things,
wait, brother, I love you, brother. If God is the one determining it, even if you want to say that the he is Titus, it's rightly attributable to God. God is still the one doing the determining. It's not like Titus determined that the prophecy would
right?
be
But the
fulfilled.
he is not God. The he is
Even if you want to take
Titus in
that,
terms of the immediate.
I'm fine with hypothetically
Man.
granting that.
He is just hell bent on denying God's sovereignty.
You guys catch that?
I did. He is hell bent on denying God's sovereignty.
Yeah, I don't know what Solar thinks about that, but when I heard that, I was like, wow, like he so strongly wants to emphasize Titus here that he's not recognizing that this is a prophecy from God, that he has determined these things to take place.
Yeah, I mean,
Aye.
three times in 4 verses, it talks about decreed and determination. So, verse 24, these 70 weeks are decreed about your people. So, who's decreeing? In verse 24, it's God, and it's all these 70 weeks. Verse 26, like we mentioned,
Yeah.
the desolations are decreed. The desolations come about by the Roman people. Verse 27, same thing. The decreed end is poured out on the desolator. That'd be the Jews. The decreed end is poured out on the Jews. I mean, that's all God. I mean, it's just
like, and so did you hear his answer? His answer was, well, but still the he there is referring to Titus. Completely missing the point I just made. Even if we grant that, you still have God being rightly attributable to that event. God is the one determining that they will have this outcome.
yeah. And it is interesting. A
Right.
side note: at first, the Romans didn't even want to destroy the temple in Jerusalem. They came with words of peace to the zealots and said, "Stop what you guys are doing, act normal, quit acting retarded, and go back to everyday life, and we'll go back to where we came from." They didn't want that. So really, their actions caused the Romans to do this, because if they had agreed to it, then none of this would happen.
Right. The Romans did not deploy legions like that frivolously. Well, it did happen in Roman history, but they typically didn't deploy a legion frivolously. You had to be doing something quite severe to find a legion of Roman soldiers deployed against you. And even then, they typically took as many precautions as possible to avoid war.
Yeah.
All right. I wrote a comment in the live chat and it says YouTube rejected your comment. This usually means they think it's spam. Try changing it again. My own comment on my own live stream is spam. Okay.
But
No,
what I'm saying
because
is,
you need Messiah. With your interpretation, you need Messiah as the he of Daniel 9:27,
well,
because
that's
you're
because
saying
I
there's
don't.
only one person throughout.
I'm not convinced that the people of the prince is referring to another person, but
Would you agree that the
even
people of the prince,
what
would you agree that Commander Titus and his Roman legion came in 70 AD, specifically
fine.
60? Okay, so you agree with that, but you don't
That's
want to
fine.
make that connection.
I just think that
I don't
it's
want to deny
Christ
God his
using the-
sovereignty. Oh, goodness.
And again, my simple point was, even if we grant that God used Titus, God was still the one doing it.
Yeah.
God is still the determiner. It's
Yes,
not that
that's correct.
Titus was the determiner.
The way Donny presents this, when he makes claims of magic and happenstance toward his opponent, is astonishing. Who compelled General Titus, not Commander Titus, General Titus, to invade with armies, legions, to repel the Jewish revolt? Did they just do this of their own accord?
And that
According
was
to
our
Donnie,
whole
it
point.
seems like they did.
Yeah, our whole point is this has been determined. It's a 70-week prophecy that has been decreed.
Right. I mean, it is sad that he's debating you on prophecy, but he can't understand that you just deny. Not only have you denied the prophecy, denied God's sovereignty, you're actually going so far that you deny the mechanism behind prophecy.
Yeah, it's really
Like-
strange. Like, that's what threw me off. I don't know if you guys caught it too, but it seems like he's emphasizing Titus so strongly that he's taking out the fact that God determined it to take place.
Right.
Now, it could be, to give him the benefit of the doubt, I'll say this. It could be that he's just so focused on refuting your point, or trying to, at least trying to get you to see that the people of the prince, if they are the Roman legion, then you are acknowledging his position to be true. It could be that's what he's wanting to hyper focus on right now.
Yeah.
I don't
but-
listen to him a lot on this subject, so I'm not sure if that's the case. But to give him the benefit of the doubt, I would say that.
Yeah,
No,
and
he's usually
I think
pretty consistent when he hammers this topic at Praise's channel, especially on this point. And but what's undeniably true is, yeah, Donnie ain't exactly a believer in God's sovereignty.
yeah,
Right.
it's kind of concerning here, but the issue that I had, and it was very simple. Even if we hypothetically grant that his view is true here, he still does not escape the point I was making, that God has determined for Titus to do what he did, and therefore they are functioning as God's people, not in a covenantal
That's
I know
correct.
you sense, but in the sense that they are carrying out his plan.
Yep.
And so in
Maybe,
that
maybe
sense,
the
it's
next
rightly
time you run
attributable to
into
them.
this, John, you ought to remind him, or remind whoever's debating is probably Donnie. Isaiah 45, who held Cyrus's hand?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So that's the issue. I'm still going to be listening, but I'm going to have to hop out. But you guys can continue with this. I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts, but I got to hop out for now.
For you, I will bear through the Khmarik beer.
Forgive me, brother. It's only downhill from here.
So, since you don't speak Lebanese Arabic, Khmarik beer, how would you translate that? So I know it to mean big jackass.
I couldn't translate that for you. I don't speak it.
Khmar means jackass and ikbir means big. I know this
I'll take
because
your word for it.
I got called smart enough that I finally looked at them and said, "How do you say big smart? Ikbir." Ah,
But
probably-
love you guys. I'm gonna hop out, but you guys can continue. Love you
yes,
guys.
Lord
Peace,
bless
yeah.
and keep you, brother.
I'll probably go for like 15 minutes, and I'm gonna maybe do part 2 another time. All right, let's roll.
All right.
Those people to accomplish it.
But they're not the people of Christ. We're the people of Christ. That's a stretch. The people of the prince.
I just
We
think
understand
they
that the
can
people
be
of the
used-
prince are the Roman legion. The prince is lowercase p. It is
Well, that's translational.
Commander
brother.
Titus.
That's
But again,
translational.
hey, would you agree with me?
Now, I do want to bring this point out a little bit. As you pointed out, Ryan, verse 26, it says, after 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and have nothing, and the people, actually, excuse me, let me get a different translation, my bad. All right, here we go. Verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, so there's Prince right there, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Verse 26, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and sanctuary. The only other prince mentioned is in verse 25, and it's the Messiah. And so you either have to artificially, it seems like artificially insert that there is another prince here mentioned that is not the prince of verse 25, but it seems to make more sense that the people of the prince here in verse 26 are the people of the prince of verse 25.
Right, but there again, these people, according to Donny, are not God's people. I
Yeah.
guess they just spurted up out of the ground a whole Roman legion with its general to march on Jerusalem.
Right.
That your chapter breaks, chapter 9, your verses, they were
No.
added after the fact. They're not inspired scripture.
Mhm.
Okay, so we have the context. Go right to Daniel 8, which is right before Daniel 9. You'd agree, my brother.
Well, that's a different prophecy. That's not context.
Yes, this is comically bad because he actually thinks that you can read the book of Daniel progressively. The chapters 1 through 12 are all the identical prophecy. Well, it is the prophecy from Daniel. That's true.
Right.
But it's more than that. The prophecies contained here from chapters 1 through chapter 4 through chapter 9 through chapter 12, whatever, are different prophecies that deal with centuries and millennia of different material.
Yeah, I mean, at the very best, what you could say is if chapter 8 talks about anything that has to do with the fourth beast, then possibly you could say that it's part of the context and adds more to chapter 9. But the fact remains that chapter 8 deals with the third beast, not the fourth beast. So it's not the context that adds anything to chapter 9.
And we already know who takes away the daily sacrifice. It's the dragon. It is the enemy of God. It's not God himself. Notice Daniel 8 on the screen. Can you read verse 11 for me, my brother John?
Well, I'm agreeing with you that in these other passages, I think they're referring to, someone who's not God, and in that case,
Right.
Antiochus. I'm just saying that Daniel 9 is a prophecy unto itself. It's not a prophecy that's contingent upon other prophecies.
But God expects us to have read Daniel 8 before Daniel 9. And what does Daniel 8 say? It says, yea. It says, yea, he magnified. Well,
tell me, Sola, if I'm wrong or if I'm right. Didn't he just say that the chapter divisions were man-made?
Yes.
Why is he treating them as though they're not?
Good question. Good question. I would say that this point right here that he's trying to make about chapter 8 and with 9 is a moot point because, like I already mentioned,
it is a moot point.
Yeah. Here we go.
Who's the he? It's the little horn. It's
Mhm.
Antiochus Epiphanes who came out of the Third Empire, because once Alexander the Great died, he died at a young age. You know that he died prematurely. There was no
Mhm.
immediate successor. So the Grecian Empire was broken up into 4 kingdoms. You had the Seleucid kingdom, the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt.
Yeah.
So out of the Seleucid kingdom came Antiochus Epiphanes. And so that's what Daniel 8's talking about. And it said by
Mhm.
him, Antiochus Epiphanes, the daily sacrifice was taken away. And it also talks about how the person who takes away the daily sacrifice also sets up the transgression of desolation.
Okay.
It's not Jesus who's setting up the abomination of desolation. It is somebody who is working through the power and influence of Satan. So when we get to Daniel 9, there's no question. There's somebody here that's taking away the daily sacrifice. And in the same way that it's not Jesus in Daniel 8, it's not Jesus in Daniel 9. We have to be familiar with Daniel 8 as we move into Daniel 9. Go ahead, John.
John isn't saying that Messiah is taking away the daily. Well, actually, you could actually. No, I take that back. Sorry, I'm getting a little tired. Messiah actually did take away, in a theological, or I say a spiritual sense, the daily sacrifice, right? Unless Donny believes that Christians who followed the Messiah after his ascension to the right hand of the Father still had to do sacrifices, because Messiah, they did not, because Messiah, in a very real sense, was the ultimate sacrifice, and so followers of him did not have to sacrifice. So in that way, he did take away the sacrifices.
Yeah, I think I just have to respectfully disagree with
It's right
the
here.
Oh, that's why you weren't talking. Okay. There you go. Da, da, da. I'll wait till you get back. I'll get your thoughts on if you heard what I said. If not, I'll repeat it. Or I'll rewind it a little bit. 23. There we go. If you're listening, Ryan, I put the link back. You can hop back in, and we'll cover this point, and then maybe one other point he makes, and then I'll end the stream. He returns.
People of the interwebs, I have returned.
All right, I'm gonna play this, and then I'll make my point again.
The Seleucid kingdom came Antiochus Epiphanes. And so that's what Daniel 8's talking about. And it said by him, Antiochus Epiphanes, the daily sacrifice was taken away. And it also talks about how the person who takes away the daily sacrifice also sets up the transgression of desolation.
Okay.
It's not Jesus who's setting up the abomination of desolation. It is somebody who is working through the power and influence of Satan. So when we get to Daniel 9, there's no question. There's somebody here that's taking away the daily sacrifice. And in the same way that it's not Jesus in Daniel 8, it's not Jesus in Daniel 9. We have to be familiar with Daniel 8.
Satan. So Satan is more powerful and sovereign than God.
Well, okay, so right, Christ did not literally set up the abomination of desolation. He's correct in that.
Right.
But Christ did end sacrifices for his people, for those who follow him or in Messiah. So in a very real sense, Messiah did end sacrifices.
Right.
And that's what verse 26
why? Because Christ is preparing the way for the new covenant. He is doing away with the Old Testament system, which, as Hebrews says, is vanishing away. It's decayed, old, and vanishing away. Again, when we try to cling to man-made doctrines, man-made conclusions, we do so at our own peril.
Yep. Verse 26, and after 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. So he believes that refers to Messiah. And so he's got to acknowledge that means what he said is just wrong in part because Messiah did end sacrifices by his death and resurrection
Right.
and ascension.
Christ didn't simply end them. He then sent in General Titus's legions to make it impossible so that those sacrifices could ever be offered again. So that way there's no confusion. You can't just go back to the old temple and sacrifice a heifer because you sinned, or make the free will oblation. It's not there for you to make anymore.
Exactly. And it makes me think of this verse, Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13. In speaking of a new covenant, he makes the first one obsolete, and what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. So he makes the first one obsolete. So in 33 AD,
Right.
32 AD,
That
whatever you want to.
that was to what I was alluding a moment ago.
Yep.
The covenant vanishes away because it's obsolete. God can't stand that old covenant by way of comparison of what it brings. So here again, Christ was not a foreshadow of Antichrist, which is what Donny has to make this out to be.
Now, to John's benefit, obviously, live discussions when you're in the heat of the moment can be, and Donnie's pretty good. He'll talk pretty fast, and he's really good at controlling the conversation, whether it's good or bad. That's up to you. But he is very good at controlling
Typical salesman.
And so it's not. This isn't anything against John for the conversation. He did pretty well, especially considering he had no sleep for like over a day, he said. So he did pretty well. But a lot of this stuff is that Donnie is saying when you just slow down, it's pretty bad.
Well, it is bad. And the thing is, Donnie is doggedly trying to get John to engage on this plain reading hermeneutic. That's the scary part. He's foisting this on people.
Yeah.
We move into Daniel 9. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think I just have to respectfully disagree with
It's right
the
here.
way
You
that you're.
disagree, but it's right here. And that's,
Well,
if my
it's-
slide, you have Daniel 8, Daniel 9.
Well,
we know who
here's
takes
the
away
issue,
the
though.
daily.
Well, Donnie is the Jamie of dispensationalism. He's like just that reaction right
Yeah,
there.
basically. It's so sad because he's desperate to cling up, but he's in genuine disbelief. Like, how do you not see this, Donnie? Because no one does this. You won't find virtually anyone at a seminary worth its salt that does this. Call up Christ for the nations. Let's think about somebody who'd be far away from Calvinism. Call up Christ for the nations and ask them if they can help you in their Old Testament department as to how to interpret Daniel 9. And if you tell them that this is what you believe, they're going to look at you cross-eyed.
Yeah. I just that his statement right there when John started talking, he's like, "It's right there. How can you not believe it?" It just makes me think of all the past in Adventism where you're reading about the investigative judgment in Daniel 8:14, and you're talking to somebody who doesn't believe it. How can you not see it? It's right there. It is that same mindset that I saw in him right there. That's why I
Yeah,
said
no,
that.
it is funny because it's the IFB, so it's definitely not Adventism.
Right.
But the cultic conclusions are quite similar.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
They sacrifice.
It's the exegetical methodology that you're using that I'm disagreeing with. I don't.
Interpreting scripture with scripture? Following the context?
What I'm saying is you can't.
Well, no, you're not actually following the context, like I pointed out, and I'll say this again.
Well, see, but right, that's the problem. Donnie has presented a package that makes it look like that.
Yeah.
But in point of fact, I would have messed with him. I said, "Oh, so what does this have to do with Daniel 1?"
Yeah.
You hold that the whole book has to do with the same thing from the 1st to the 12th chapter. What does it have to do with Daniel? And he probably look at me cross like, I don't know. This is not how we do hermeneutics.
No, right. I mean, like I said, I'll say it again, is that the context has to do, if you want to go to other chapters, you have to go to the chapters into the section of the chapter that talks about the fourth beast, because Christ died, and chapters 26 and 27 have to do with the fourth beast, not the third beast. So whatever the little horn does in the third beast kingdom is going to be different. It's not going to be identical to what happens in the fourth beast.
Squish different prophecies into one another. I would be very careful with that, because then you could do the same thing with prophecies that technically aren't about Christ, that the New Testament interprets to be about Christ, and say, well, it doesn't really mean it's about Christ. I would just be really careful with that, brother.
John, can
It's
you do
just
me
a
a
caution
favor?
on an exegetical
I
thing.
I appreciate it, my brother, and I'm enjoying this. I'm just passionate on this topic. So
Me too, brother. I understand. So don't worry about it.
So on the screen, the slide that I have, can you read Daniel 12:11 for me?
And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, an abomination that maketh desolate set up, it shall be 1,290 days.
So in Daniel 12:11, who's the one taking away the daily sacrifice?
Well, I haven't read the context, but
Well, I can tell you it's Antiochus Epiphanes in terms of the immediate fulfillment.
No. So wait, so he is what? Wait, so he
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Huh.
When did Antiochus Epiphanes even live? Did he bother to look that up?
That is interesting. So he takes a dual fulfillment for all of chapter 12 and 11, or most of it. And
Well, but how? How would you do that with the text that is in chapters 10, 11, and 12?
because if he's saying chapter 12 right there, and the immediate fulfillment is Antiochus, he's taking the higher critical position.
Right. This is higher criticism.
Yes.
Does he know that? No.
I don't know. That is
But
fascinating.
well, actually, I've had conversations with Donny in the years gone by where I've told him you are taking the liberal higher critical position with this, and he just kind of looked at me dumbfounded, like, "No, I'm not. I don't know enough about that." But Donny, I'm telling you, this is the liberal position.
Wow, I never, that kind of blows me away. Actually, I was not expecting that. That's crazy.
But again, it's so weird. Why do you have to take this interpretation? George Ladd did not interpret Daniel this way.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he's doing that. I don't know.
Well, but do you grasp the point of what I'm saying? Classic premills and dispensational premills don't have to interpret Daniel this way.
No, exactly. Yeah, I agree. All right.
read the context, but
well, I can tell you it's Antiochus Epiphanes in terms of the immediate fulfillment. In the future, I would argue it's the Antichrist. See, all throughout Scripture, we have shadow and immediate fulfillments, localized fulfillments, but we also have a more literal, dramatic fulfillment in the end times.
Okay, so his idea of shadow and future fulfillment is the shadow repeats exactly how the shadow was, but it repeats in the future. That's fascinating. Crazy. I would not hold to that hermeneutic at all. No way.
Now,
well, how could it even be called a hermeneutic? Because the shadow just repeats itself. Well, what do we, Donny? Do we believe in verbal plenary inspiration? If we do, then we know that we don't just isolate one book of the Bible from the rest of them. It's not as though Daniel is in confliction with the rest of the Scripture.
Yeah, that just, oh man, that blows me away. That's crazy. Wild.
Well, no, I want to finish my point. So, and then it says, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up. So would you agree that the person who's taking away the daily sacrifice in Daniel 12:11 is also the person who's setting up the abomination of desolation?
There, yeah.
Okay. Daniel 11 now. Everybody would agree for the most part, I think, at least in the scholarly world, that this is also Antiochus Epiphanes. So notice this. An arm shall stand on his part, and they...
What he just said is untrue. the scholarly world does not necessarily all agree that it's Antiochus Epiphanes, first of all. Second of all, which scholars?
I'll say Daniel 11:31. I would say most all scholars will say that's Antiochus. Verse 31. Yes, no doubt. We all agree.
Yeah, verse
We all-
31, right. Now, if you're talking about verse 31, correct.
Yeah.
But Donny is terrible about doing this in debates. Will most of the scholars agree with this? On what?
Yeah, he wasn't super clear. Now, if he's saying that most scholars believe that all of 12 is about Antiochus, no, that would be mainly only the higher critical scholars.
That's correct.
So now we actually have the third person plural pronoun, they. This makes sense because, yeah, you have an army, but then you have a commander or you have a leader, right? It's not like it's just one man, Antiochus Epiphanes, who's just setting up this massive statue. His people are doing it for him. He's the one commanding it. And they
Yes,
shall. So I would say that refutes.
Wow. How does he understand that? But he doesn't understand. Yes, Antiochus Epiphanes is a tool in God's hand.
Yeah. And actually, the sovereignty of God is all over the book, Dan, to be honest with you. Chapter 7, another example on top of what we've already pointed out. When it talks about the four winds and the beast rising, who's telling the beast to rise? First beast, second
God
beast.
does.
Yeah, exactly. Arise, devour. I mean, God is the one who's commanding that. But
The idea that it's Messiah in Daniel 9 too, because this is a third person plural pronoun. This is multiple people helping whoever the leader is. And so it says, and they shall take, so now it's they, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. So would you agree that Daniel 11 and Daniel 12 have whoever is taking away the daily sacrifice is also setting up this image? Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay. Here's my final question, then take as long as you want. We've gone through Daniel 8. We've gone through Daniel 11. We've gone through Daniel 12. We're left with Daniel 9. What we've discovered is that it's never Messiah who's taking away the daily sacrifice. It's never Messiah who's setting up the abomination that maketh desolate.
It's never God. Donnie, can we just deny the New Testament and deny the Messiah a little more clearly? My Lord.
It's either Antiochus
Brother,
Epiphanes.
I hate to do this to you. I'm going to have to tuck her out as well. I need to do my nightly devotions.
yes, I realize it's past 11 and I should end this. So I'll just end it right now.
Well, it's actually past 1 in the morning where I am, not 11. So
Oof.
I'm much later than you.
Oof.
That said, you take care, brother.
Grace and peace.
Lord bless you.
All right. I think I'm going to actually end it right here. So I want to thank everybody who tuned in live or listened to it later. I do appreciate that. And I will try to get to part 2. Who knows when, but I'm 27 minutes in. So the last half, Lord willing, I will get through that. I hope you guys have a good night. Grace and peace. God bless.